We meet on various territories. Territories are the First Peoples. And for many of us here, we're on the traditional territories of the Coast Salish peoples who've lived and loved and cared for this land for millennia. May we find ways to walk together towards conciliation. I'm Reverend Meg Roberts, and I'm lucky enough to be able to work with the Beacon Unitarian Church here in the Lower Mainland of Vancouver. As Unitarians, we are people of all ages, many backgrounds, people of many beliefs. We've been exploring Beacon's purpose this fall, and we'll continue to do so. And so from a workshop that we did, the startup workshop, people started to try and formulate some ideas about it. So we're sharing some of the draft versions, and this one from Peggy, that Beacon's purpose is to provide a home for our spiritual lives, to put words to our deep feelings about our world and our place in it. Thanks, Peggy, for that. So if you have ideas, you weren't able to be at that workshop, or if you were and you have other ideas, please send them to me and we'll be able to share some of them in future services. For guests and newcomers, we offer you a special welcome. If you want to find out more about us on our website under the facts page, it's beaconunitarian.org. And as I just mentioned, there's a Beacon Connecting form, and Susan will put the link in the chat. We have small groups that we would love to have you part of a variety of topics and interests. And also, of course, after our service, we offer a coffee hour. So we take a 10-minute break and then have the option to come back and join some small group check-in and then discussion time on some different topics. And David will be telling us more about that after the service. Also, for those who like to be able to draw as they're listening, there are also some coloring pages. And so Susan will drop the link into that for the chat as well. If you don't know where the chat is, at the bottom of your screen if you're on a computer, if you take your cursor to the bottom of the Zoom screen, you'll probably see the word chat, and if you don't, it may be under the More section. If you click on it, then it will pop up either as a separate bubble or just on the right-hand side of your screen. If you're on a different device, then you may have to search around a little bit, and some devices you may not have the option. If there are things that come up in the chat that we think are just information for everybody, not the joys and sorrows part, but we're going to be able to take some of the information sharing and include that in the coming weeks, Beacon this week. So if you're sharing something and you don't want it in that, you can always just let me know. But we find that it's nice for people. Some people just prefer not to have the chat on because it's just kind of technology overload. So just know that if there's any key things, we will be sharing it that way. This morning, we also want to offer a special welcome for families. For those who may be new to us, during our regular in-person Sunday services, normally the children and youth would transition into an age-specific program after our Time for All Ages. But because we're continuing to meet virtually due to the pandemic, we are inspired to envision new ways to engage and connect. Our Director of Religious Exploration, Ashley Cole, is doing just that this morning as she spends time reaching out to families directly and is preparing to send out a monthly program kit based on the monthly theme of our principles. If you're a family looking to connect, Susan will include Ashley's contact information in the chat. She will be able to reach out and answer any questions you have and also include your family in our monthly program. So now for our opening words and chalice lighting. If you would like to join with me in lighting a chalice where you are, now's the time to just have it close to you. We call this light before us in hope that we may always remain a strong community, working together to make the world a better place. When we are grieving or sad, when we are challenged, when we need help, this flame guides us out of the darkness. When we're cheerful, when we celebrate, when we accomplish a great task, when we return to a place that makes us happy, this chalice reminds us to share our happiness with others. So might it be. I want to share my reflection with you for this morning. So I go to drop something off at my neighbor's the other day, and she points out this big web. It's 2 feet across in her front garden. The spider is big and rather intimidating. Now, I'm not normally afraid of spiders, but she makes my skin shiver. And then I looked more closely at her, and I saw the beautiful design on her body. She sat quietly in the middle of her web, patiently waiting. And then, of course, I remembered what she does in that system. With bugs, like mosquitoes that she catches, the system there, the garden, the plants, the spider, the insects, my neighbor and me. What we do within it affects each other. We are so interconnected. When I was training for ministry, we learned about systems theory as it applied to families and congregations. Put simply, systems theory recognizes our interdependence. Systems thinking started in biology. When you think of a pond, for example, the parts are interconnected. The water, the stream running into that pond, the ducks, the insects, the plants growing there. And when something changes in one part, it affects all parts. An interdependent web is about the relationships between the parts. There are patterns that get created because of those relationships within the system. Systems, of course, also apply to people, to our families, our workplaces, and our congregations. Also, how our human communities relate to the earth. It's a series of systems within systems. Just as any ecosystem has ways of operating that keep it healthy, so does our human community. So what can we learn to help us function in healthier ways within our family system, within beacons, and within the larger web of existence? Our whole world is in a state of significant change because of the pandemic. It's caused changes in patterns of behavior on all levels. These changes can bring up lots of feelings, especially as we've been in this part of the world for over half a year. Feelings of frustration, grief, anger, apathy, a desire to turn away from it all. These changes draw into even sharper contrast the disparities in our society, as well as friction points in our personal relationships. How can we respond to all these changes right now? Well, at times like this, I find it useful to turn to research and as well to my spiritual practice. Peter Steinke, who works with congregational leaders, describes the impact of emotional systems. Families are emotional systems, as are our workplaces and our congregations. This work comes out of the research and models from Murray Bowen's family systems work and Edward Friedman's applying this to model this model to congregational systems. Some of you will have heard some of this before, and I hope there might be something a little bit later on that might be new to you. But if not, I hope it's a good reminder. And you can think about it, how it applies now to you in this time. In this work, the emotional response refers not so much just to feelings, but is about anything in our behavior that's instinctive, automatic, reactive, defensive. And about 90% of our behavior is emotional in this way. In a human system, Steinke explains that the emotional system won't change unless they change how they function with each other. I appreciated this example of an emotional response pattern in his marriage that he shared. His wife says to him, "You're not listening to me." Automatically, defensively, he says, "Yes, I am." So more intentionally, she says, "No, you're not." And he says more emphatically, "Yes, I am." So why with maturity does he not just say, "No, I'm not, but I would like to hear what you have to say"? He explains, "I haven't evolved to that step yet, and I probably will do that next week." Now, would it were that simple in our relationships? And I imagine you might be aware and can think of some emotional response patterns in your relationships, whether with a partner, family member, or at work. Now, systems like coherence. They like stability, which is what is familiar, whether the way it's functioning is healthy or whether those patterns are dysfunctional, painful, or just not working for someone's well-being anymore or the well-being of the system. Systems do like, however, to be in homeostasis, in this context meaning to keep functioning in the same way. When there are changes, those in the system may experience increased anxiety. This can be exacerbated because of things going on in other areas of someone's life or challenges earlier in their life that can get triggered when a significant change occurs. So what does Steinke recommend? In the emotional system, you function better if you can handle anxiety. Humans are anxious creatures. It's what has helped us survive. It's kept us alert from danger. And there's another positive function to it. It actually can help us to change. He explains, pain at some level is a motivator. Now, at some point, when it reaches a certain intensity and it is prolonged, it'll prevent the very thing it might have provoked, because now it paralyzes rather than it motivates. And when the system gets anxious, there's less clarity, less thoughtfulness, and people do not respond to love. So how many of us have noticed our anxiety levels increasing at various points in the last months? Definitely. When you're anxious, you don't want to change or deal with something new, and you want to have that anxiety relieved. In a system of people, where does that anxiety go? Steinke's research says that anxiety generally goes to two functioning positions within the system of relationships. The anxiety gets focused on the person or people in the most responsible position: head of staff, board of directors, minister, teacher, parent, etc. Or the anxiety gets focused on the most vulnerable position: someone new to a workplace, a young person in the family, or someone who's vulnerable in some other way, or someone new to a congregation or a group in it. I'm going to pause for a moment in case anybody's wondering, is there some big problem here at the church that I don't know about? No. What I'm talking about are tools that are good for us to have in our toolkits, both for our families, our workplaces, and this community and others that you're part of. In a time like a pandemic, when there is so much anxiety, it's good to be reminded of these kinds of tools in our toolkits. Being proactive in thinking about them and how to apply them is always better than waiting until there is a problem and then trying to learn how to address it amidst increased anxiety, when it's hard to think straight, when you're overwhelmed by that anxiety. The other thing that happens with increased anxiety is that two people in a relationship where there's anxiety form a triangle. Now, Murray Bowen recognizes that every dyad relationship at some point will be rocky. In order to stabilize, someone in the dyad will bring in a third party. Triangles are natural. They happen all the time. What is dysfunctional, he says, is when you allow yourself to be triangulated. Because in some sense, you then take on the responsibility for the lives of these other two people, because it relieves their anxiety, but you then have all that anxiety. Can you think of an example in your life when two other people, because they were anxious, someone turned to you, and afterwards you ended up feeling more anxious, wondering maybe what you could do to help solve their problem, or how it will affect you relating to either of the people in the relationship? So Steinke encourages us, don't take responsibility for issues that people have with each other. Those in positions of responsibility have to look out for triangulation and not allow yourself to be brought in. Now, I'm not talking about ignoring issues, especially in cases like abuse, racism, or other forms of oppression. I'm talking about how we respond in ways that make the system healthier and not increase anxiety. Mainly now I'm talking about interpersonal issues, but there are ways that this applies in larger systems as well, like our society. So how do you stop getting drawn into triangulation? Work on self-differentiation. This occurs in relationship where you become a self that is connected to other people. You become aware of what your position is on things, and don't just change it to relieve someone else's anxiety or pain. You consider the interests of the whole system as well, the family, the workplace, the congregation. If you're anxious about being separate, remember to use I statements. I think, I feel, I made a mistake. It's not about giving up your position if someone doesn't agree with it, or if you fear being ostracized or not liked. It's about being clear on where you are in all of this. If I don't self-differentiate, then I will want the other person to change, to agree with me, to take the same point of view as I have, or to feel like I do. Now, it doesn't mean that we can't have discussion and come to a consensus or change our minds. It's part of the beauty of being in a group, that we learn from each other and come out of a discussion with a stronger group decision. But it's about what motivates each of us to do that. Is it anxiety? Worrying about how it affects our relationships with others in the group? Or is it really deciding you agree with this other point of view? To be differentiated is to notice when you are operating out of the thinking brain or to the instinctually reactive brain. Now, we need all parts of our brain. Emotions as well give us information. They can help us make better decisions. We just want to be aware where our actions and words are coming from. So, for example, Ferdinand the bull, he was fairly self-differentiated. He was able to sit under the cork tree and smell flowers because that's what he preferred rather than running around butting heads with other bulls. His instinctive reactive brain, however, kicked in when he was stung by the bee. And then, when he got into the bull ring, he did what his thinking brain preferred, sitting, smelling the flowers, no matter what they did to him. So those who are in positions of responsibility and leadership, it requires that you have capacity to manage your emotional responses. Otherwise, the system will be infected by your anxiety. And just as anxiety is infectious, so too is calm reflectiveness. It allows other individuals their point of view. I'm guessing parents and grandparents know what I'm talking about when it comes to infectious anxiety or infectious calm reflection. Steinke brought up an important insight from Murray Bowen. If you can tolerate pain in others, that is the degree to which they will grow. If we feel uncomfortable in the presence of others' pain because we feel uncomfortable with pain itself, we can be shifted out of ourself, not for reasons that lead to well-being, but because of not being able to tolerate discomfort. The degree you can tolerate pain in your life is the proportion you will grow. Now, Bowen is not talking about physical pain or emotional trauma. He's talking about discomfort and anxiety when you are in with someone and want to take away their pain or give in to them just because of it. Of course, if pain exceeds a certain threshold, it isn't helpful in any way. I know how easy it can be, for example, when a friend comes to me and talks about troubles they have with a sibling, for example, to just want to say, oh, isn't that awful? What was she thinking? But when I can be present to their pain and try not to relieve it by offering answers, and instead just be there to listen as they figure it out, it allows them the chance to grow and learn to manage their own feelings and issues. I can tell them that I believe in them and that they will find a way to deal with it without trying to step in to solve it. When tranquility is upset, we need to find ways to be non-anxious. When you can be aware of your own anxiety, then you can be aware of the instinctual behavior that can be triggered by it. We want to be more responsive than reactive. If we don't have answers and feel ourselves becoming reactive, we can ask for more time to consider a response, like we could do with children when we say, this is a good time for a timeout. It's not considered a punishment, but as a way to calm the feelings and be able to look at what's happening and to think and feel about it. To pause, take a breath. It means, of course, being more aware of ourselves. Past relationships and their emotional patterns impact how we respond to others now. We can be drawn into relationship patterns again and again with other people. I see this as an opportunity to grow. I can't control the other person's responses, but I can learn and practice responding differently now. This self-awareness also applies not just to us as individuals, but also to the groups that we're part of, the family as a whole, the department in a workplace, a group of leaders in a congregation, and even the congregation as a whole. Now, becoming more aware is where spiritual practice comes in for me. Taking time to reflect on what's happening in my life, in the relationships with others, helps me become conscious of my reactive behavior and the patterns of responses that might be happening. what's impacting it from other times in my life, from my family, from times growing up, past relationships. When I can bring curiosity and compassion to myself and the other person. Meditation and prayer help me. Going for walks, even just taking 10 minutes at the end of the day to wind down and just reflect on my day. See if there are any insights I have into what's happened. And then offer gratitude, like we did earlier in the song, for the joy of human care, for our sibling, parent, child, for the kinship we all share. Source of all, to thee we raise this our hymn of grateful praise. Now, problems are normal in any relationship or group. It's how we respond to it that matters. One of our guiding principles for planning this year at Beacon is using democratic process, getting feedback, town halls, congregational meetings. At meetings, making sure that all who want to speak get a chance to be heard. Not always making a decision right away if we need to take extra time. And then when a group does make a decision, not allowing anxiety alone within the system to shift it. So not getting triangulated means that people in a relationship need to learn how to withstand discomfort and be direct with each other in ways that are compassionate and constructive. If there are things that I do or say that upset or bother you, I invite you to talk directly to me. And I invite you to do the same with each other and those in your family or workplace. I'd like to finish with one more thought. Peter Steinke talks about it being good for a system to feel a sense of purpose and direction, to feel like we're making a difference. So in the coming months, we're exploring Beacon's purpose. And while we're doing that, we're focusing, especially this year, on connecting with compassion and respect. We're also providing programs to offer ways for us to engage that help us and our larger systems move towards health and well-being, systems like our Earth and our society. Teresa and I are co-captains for Beacon's team in the Eco Challenge, which runs October 7th to the 28th. 3 weeks, the perfect amount of time to change patterns of behavior. Teresa's meeting with people during the coffee hour who want to know more, as well as talking about other eco-justice issues. And either she or I, in the coming weeks in coffee hour, will be there for offering a supportive group and for people to learn more about how to join up. And believe me, it's much more fun to be part of a supportive team to affect change than trying to do it on our own. Susan will put more information in the chat about how to contact us and how to sign up. There'll also be a facts sheet this week in the emailed Beacon this week to learn more about how to join. Also in November, I will start an adult programming to learn more about racism and racial justice. I'll be sending out details in early October. It's easy to feel overwhelmed with all the changes we've had to deal with this year. I hope that some of the research might be useful to you that I talked about, as well as ways of using spiritual practice and other self-reflective exercises. It's in the web of connection that we support each other to change behavior. Systems within systems, our families, our communities, and our Earth. For the beauty of the Earth, for the splendor of the skies, for the love which from our birth over and around us lies. Source of all, to thee we praise this our hymn of grateful praise. We're now going to take a little bit of time in quiet meditation. That pause for reflection, self-reflection, to be conscious of how we're feeling right now, what we're thinking, patterns that might be going on in our relationships, how we're dealing with our own anxiety. I'm going to ask Heather to bring up our slide to remind us about sharing the plate. Beacon gratefully accepts donations to our church via Interac. You can send it to treasurer@beaconunitarian.org, and just let us know whether it applies to Beacon or our Sharing the Plate recipient, the New West Hospice Society. For all who have given and are able to give at this time, thank you for your generosity. I'll ask Heather to take us to the slide for our sung response led by Sue.
For all that is our life, we sing our thanks and praise. For all life is a gift which we are called to use to build the common good and make our own days glad.
Thanks, Sue. Just before our closing words, we just want to thank all who were supporting this service this morning. And in the next slide as well, especially for our tech team that often is behind the scenes and you don't know they're working hard. Thanks also to David and Susan and Peg, who'll be hosting our coffee hour, which starts 10 minutes after the service. We hope you'll stay and join us. And especially a thanks to you for joining us all this morning. Now our closing words. We call for this blessing on all sheltered here, whether in body or in spirit. May the flame of our community ignite a love bold enough to share. And in return, may we all be embraced by a love that remains constant in times of sorrow and in days of great gladness. Join with me in extinguishing our flame wherever yours is. Heather will bring up the slide and we'll sing Carry the Flame together.
And if you put your hands out like this, it'll look like we might be holding hands with each other. See, where's my hand? There we go. Okay. Carry the flame of peace and love until we meet again. Carry the flame of peace and love until we meet again.
Thanks. Go well, everyone.